This is the 5-Minute Writing Corner with Troy Bernardo. An old professor of mine, Scott Starbuck, used to say that when people are reading what we write, it should be like they're in a trance. And I really like that piece of advice, because anything we say, a wrong word, a confusing action, or anything that takes the reader out of this trance and wakes them up from our world needs to be taken out of the story completely. And there's really one way to make sure our writers wake up, which we don't want to do, and that's by using cliche and stereotypical writing. So today, we're going to discuss the top cliches to avoid when we are writing. After all, if I'm going to make these videos on ways to improve writing, we need to look at things to avoid to balance things out and to give us a full perspective. So today, we're doing the top 5 writing cliches to avoid. And number 1 is cliche phrases. Now let me start with a few phrases that I really hate reading. My blood turned cold. It felt like an eternity. His smile grew impossibly wide. The silence was deafening. The more you read, the more you see phrases like these ones repeated over and over and over again. And sometimes, honestly, it's beneficial to read amateurish writing, because when you read enough of it, you'll find the things you shouldn't do as a writer. For example, read some Poe, read some Stephen King or Lovecraft, and then read something from the No Sleep subreddit. And by the way, just a quick disclaimer, I love the No Sleep podcast and the No Sleep subreddit. It's really fun stuff. So I'm not trying to say it's not fun, but the more you listen to them or read them, the more you realize people describe things in the same kind of ways. Avoid these cliche sentences because they will wake your reader up, and oftentimes your piece will wind up in the editor's slush pile, which is where you don't want to be. It's important to remember that when we submit pieces for editors or magazines, all they really see is our writing. They don't know who you are, how hard you worked, or even how good of a writer you are. Find these sort of cliches, root them out, make your writing sound more professional and better. 2, the mirror. Take a look at your piece. Does your story start something like this? Jim made his way to the bathroom mirror and stared at himself. His brown locks fell over his gray eyes and he blah, 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 on and on and on. Delete it. Just automatically. You don't want this in your story. This is the only time I've really seen a seasoned writer do this and pull it off was James Baldwin when he wrote Giovanni's Room. And even that kind of made me cringe. Just that one scene. The book itself is amazing. Now, mind you, there's some differences. He was looking out a window and it was dark. So, there are some small differences. However, you're not James Baldwin. Avoid it. Physical descriptions of characters, especially ones that go into depth, are overall pretty unnecessary, I think. Sure, some physical descriptors are helpful. They help give us an idea of what someone looks like, but don't go overboard. That's a little cliche for me. Give the reader some of that basic information, but let the reader do the legwork. Let them imagine them. Number 3, the love triangle. Yeah, this is a constant joke on the Terrible Writing Advice YouTube channel. Highly worth taking a look at. Really funny stuff. And let me start by saying you can have a love triangle in a story. That's okay. That's fine if that's what you want the story to have in it. That is essentially the entire Twilight book series, and that author has sold way more books than I have. So I can't say 100% it shouldn't exist, obviously. However, there's a difference between that and jamming one in unnecessarily that makes no sense and is just there to be there because there's nothing else to offer. It makes you look bad as a writer if you're just jamming an unnecessary love triangle into a story. Throw it out, please. Unless it's truly necessary to the story, throw it out. Number 4, plot armor. This is a term when things happen to the main character that should have killed him or her. However, they are allowed to survive because the story needs to keep going. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but you do see this quite a bit. You should have danger, and that main character should experience big stakes. It's how we keep readers interested. We need stakes in the story. We need danger. However, know when it's too much and know when to stop. A great example of this is the scene in Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, where he got into a refrigerator during a nuclear bomb blast and survived. Horrible scene. We need Indiana Jones, obviously, to survive and finish the movie and make sequels, which is what they're doing now. So he can't die. It's the only reason anyone could survive something like this. It is clearly insane that this made its way into the movie. And it's important to remember that everyone hated this movie as well. It was universally disliked. So please don't do this to your story. Try to stay away from plot armor. Audiences want to relax and will allow for some ridiculousness in a story, but even that has a limit, and I guess that's Indiana Jones. 5 is when we are shown and not told literally everything. So please, please, I cannot say this enough. Please, please, please do not do this to your story. It is so overwhelming for readers to be shown everything. There's a time and a place to show and don't tell. Don't get me wrong. You need to do this a lot as a writer, but that doesn't mean everything needs to be shown, right? The worst thing you can do is show everything in a story. For example, I had to do some bad writing on this one. Jim walked to his car. Every step counting. 1, 2, 3, until he made his way past the small flower bed he planted last year. The front yard smelled of lilac, and he glanced down at his shoes. They were Oxfords. He bought them last year as a gift to himself. The sun beat down on him. He remembered he had to go to the store. He walked to his off-white sedan and blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. If this has nothing to do with the story, which it doesn't, we don't have to see it, right? Jim walked to his car. The sun and humidity burnt into him. That's fine. This is fine as long as it's driving the story forward. Don't get lost in all the details. Know when to show and when not to. This is probably the biggest giveaway that I'm reading an amateur writer versus a professional one. To go back to my professor, Scott Starbuck, the story of boy meets girl, girl and boy fall in love, and boy and girl get married has been told 1,000,000 times. Literally, probably 1,000,000,000, really, if I'm being honest. Your job as a writer or creator is to make it fresh and new. As a quick kind of side story here, there's a guy in a writing group I was part of years ago who had filled his story with stereotypes and cliches, and bad ones at that. It was really bad writing. Every paragraph had some overused phrase like stabbed in the back, rain on my parade, ice in my veins. Over and over, we were just clubbed with these cliche phrases. And when I gave him advice, that he should take them out, he got very upset. He defended his choices, saying the story was from his mother's perspective, and she isn't a good writer, so he should leave them in. Let me just say something now for everybody, including that guy. Bad writing is bad writing. It doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. The reader's not going to care. They're just going to hear cliches. And, don't rely on these overly used stereotypical writing tropes. Make your own writing your writing and be brave and be bold. So thanks again for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate it. Most importantly, though, keep on writing.